and I felt empty. So I came back to, well, I am the sum total of the people I surround myself with. And then I took an inventory of the people I surrounded myself with. I'm like, well, no wonder I feel empty right now.
Wow.
Look at who I'm spending time with all the
Yeah.
time. So I made a hard decision. I cut all of those people out of my life immediately.
Well, hey there. Welcome to the One Step podcast, where we're sharing inspirational stories of change makers in different spaces in business, nonprofit, sports, etc. So you can gain practical insights for your one step, whether you're first or you're next. And today I'm looking forward to have a great conversation with my dear friend. He is the owner of QIT Solutions, formerly known as Quantified IT, as well as the business Call Sprout. If David Goggins was here, he would look to this man and said, you know what? I needed you, Eric, to write the foreword to my book because you have all the insights that I need to know. He's a dear family friend. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for my good friend, Eric Bucher.
Awesome. That is awesome. Thank you.
No, of course. It's awesome to have you here, Eric. Thank you so much for making the time just to share your story and be on this episode.
Yeah, thank you. And wow, what a great intro that was. Thank you for that.
It is definitely heartfelt, and it just definitely speaks to how much I really do respect you and definitely look up to you in many regards. And I'm sure we're going to draw some of that from this conversation as well. Well, for listeners who don't know, I would love to ask if you could just go ahead and start us off by letting us know a little bit about yourself, who you are, and where you're up to currently.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Eric Bucher, and as you mentioned, I am the CEO and co-founder of QIT Solutions, which was born out of Quantified IT. And we just recently completed a merger with another company, hence the name change. So we more than doubled our size. We've seen an incredible amount of growth just inside of the last couple of months. And I do attribute that to the merger and the partnership I have with Jess, my partner. He brought such an amazing new set of dynamic tools through human capital, being employees, and just his own knowledge of technology that's really allowed us to take on opportunities with clients and companies that we would have previously been unable to facilitate. So it's been a great 6 months this year.
I'm sure there's a lot on your plate, and just to be in your position now, it's a big deal. I mean, from many people's standards, people would say, wow, you've achieved great success, not only just being an owner of a business, but one that has scaled, and just even highlighting the fact that you attribute a lot of that credit also to other team members and not just yourself. I think definitely speaks to your humility and just the type of leader that you are, acknowledging the work of others. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing, where you started, where did this whole journey kind of begin since perhaps even your own childhood?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. And what makes it even more interesting is as you grow as an adult and as you start your own family, you start to really connect all these dots from when you were a child, and things kind of really click into place, which is quite interesting. But we'll get into that a little bit. But I'm from Kentucky originally, in Lexington, which is central. And when I was a kid, my dream job was to be a garbage man. I was obsessed with the idea of riding on the back of a truck and thought it would be the coolest job on the planet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, really did. But and interestingly enough, my partner Jess, when he was a child, also dreamed of being a garbage man. So we have two very critical things in common, which is we wanted to be garbage man. We never became garbage man, and we both ended up in the IT space. So
wow, that's pretty amazing.
But, I was never really good at school. Maybe I didn't understand it, or maybe I thought it was a waste of time. And this is like when I was a kid and also up into college. But as I got older, I wanted to work for myself. And even as probably a young teenager, 12 or 13, I started a lawn cutting business, and I would make like $3,000 every summer.
That's amazing.
And, my parents took me to their stockbroker and helped me open up a brokerage account. And I would take my $3,000 every summer and I would invest it into the stock market.
Wow.
And, by the time I was able to drive, I had a nice little piggy bank.
That's amazing.
And if I had to do it all over again, I would have probably not gone to college. Some people would probably fall out of their chair to hear me say that. But for me personally, I felt like it was just a complete waste of time. But that's not to say it's a complete waste of time for everyone. I think I just knew from an early age that I wasn't going to I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor. I knew I wasn't going to be a lawyer. I knew I was going to be working for myself, from early teens. I knew this, but I followed the path that was laid out for me and did what I was expected to do. And I didn't do it very well. And I didn't actually finish it, but I got through it till I was old enough to be like, I'm not doing this anymore. But when I was, 20, 21, maybe 22, I started investing in real estate, and I had, by the time I was 25 or 6, I had 11 rental units, and I was unemployed, which was fine because I had 11 rental units. And, I was 25 years old making more money than most 30 to 40-year-olds. It was a good thing, but it was also a bad thing because it led me into a lot of trouble. So
Yeah, I'm sure as a 21-year-old, being
yeah,
well taken care of, you could do so much with it.
I know, at that time I did have a full-time job, but as I had that full-time job, I was acquiring these properties. And by the time I had all those units, and I quit that job, and I made a run at starting my own business outside of the rental business. It never went anywhere because I was making poor decisions. And, when you're young and you're making decent money and you have no real worldly responsibilities other than collecting rent and surviving, which is really all I had to be responsible for. I had a lot of free time, and that led me down not a great path. But the interesting thing about not great paths is you learn a lot. There was a 10-year period from like when I was 16 to 26 that I was not really present in the world. I was present in a sense that I was functioning. I was a functioning human, but I wasn't really present in the day-to-day life.
Wow.
And I was looking for ways to escape that. And I could, sit here and look at all the different psychologies behind why people in general choose different paths. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's any one reason that leads anyone down any particular path. I think it's kind of a sum total of your life experiences that lead you to wherever you end up. But the interesting thing is I would not give any of that up. I don't regret any of that experience because it taught me something very important. And it's a lesson that I don't think a lot of people have an opportunity to learn. And I think a lot of it has to do with, parents protecting children. But the lesson is, really life can get really bad. And you could think that you're in a position of no escaping it. Things are horrible. Basically, I was in a position where I was like dying. I lost everything. I had to sell all of my rentals.
Goodness.
My relationship with my family was completely destroyed. And I ended up all alone, completely broke, no money, no nothing. And I moved to Florida, and I had like 2 quarters in my pocket. And I started from ground zero, literally, when I moved here in 2006. And when I say 2 quarters, that's probably more than I really had, maybe 2 pennies. That was the real experience, is coming from a good family, not having a want or need really for anything as a child and as a teenager and even a young adult. Everything was provided for me. To grow up in that experience and basically over a very short amount of time, all of that being ripped away from you and starting out in a new state with nothing. I was working day labor for months. I would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I would walk 2 or 3 miles to the day labor place and tried my best to get a decent job. I ended up working like 8 hours a day in a factory.
Wow.
And yeah, I was working in a factory. It was making cabinets, and I was making $40 a day after taxes. And then
Goodness gracious.
the cool thing with day labor is you get paid every day. So I would get paid, and then I would go to Swifties, and the Swifties would cash my $40 check, and then I was good to have a dinner.
Wow.
That really puts things into perspective. When you don't have a car, you can't even afford a bicycle, and you have to walk an hour to get to a job that's going to pay you $40 for 8 hours of work. And then I couldn't even get a bank account, so I had to go to Swifties. Swifties takes a cut, so I made $50 in the day, but I only got 40. But it was a wild experience. And even after that, I got a job in customer service. I was making like $10 an hour at Simplex Grinnell. I was selling time cards, which is just like, I look back on that, I'm like, holy cow. I would go to this job. They basically cleaned out a closet, put me in this closet, and my sole job was to sit there, answer the phone, and take orders for time card refills.
Gosh.
going through all of that and learning how to survive and how to be a positive contributor to society, and not having mom and dad there to pick up my mess. And, it was a real quick introduction to being an adult. But the real lesson here is nothing is insurmountable, is what I learned. And no matter how bad things appear, there's always a path around whatever obstacle a person is faced with. It's a lesson I've never forgotten, and it's a skill I've continued to try to hone as I scale these two companies. And I would love to say that owning your own business is always an amazing experience, and your business is always trajectorying up into this kind of a scenario where you just grow, and everything is always awesome. But the reality is that's not the case. Clients come, clients go, you build relationships with these people, but business climates change. And there was a time not that long ago where I was just like, holy cow, we have customers leaving left and right. What is going on? And it's hard not to take that stuff personally. But the reality is, and what I've learned time and time again, and this is a lesson I'm still trying to grasp a hold of, but it's the same kind of a lesson, is, no matter how bleak the future appears, you can't predict the future.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's around the next corner. You don't know what's going to happen the next day or the next week or month or quarter, or even in the next year. One of the things that I constantly try to do is to put the things into that perspective when I'm feeling like I'm not going to be able to overcome whatever's happening in the moment.
Wow. That's super powerful. There's so much to unpack from that. And I appreciate just the transparency in your story. For one, I could imagine listeners just thinking, oh, well, he sounded like he had such a great start already at a young age, starting a lawn business, having a comfortable cushion just in case of anything, and having 11 rental properties. I mean, of course he's successful in where he's at. And you just being transparent to say that, hey, it led to a different kind of path where there were some troubles and you had to learn things for yourself. It just really shows that, one, that failure isn't final, that
Right.
there's still a next step, that there's still a hope to take a step forward. And you're evidence of that. And I just absolutely love the fact how you definitely have taken an unconventional path.
Yeah.
One thing I know that's very common is a lot of entrepreneurs have this common thread where they struggled in school for multiple different reasons. And it's the same case with your story for whatever reason, yet you still made something out of it, that you didn't allow that to be a determining factor. And unfortunately, the common narrative that's told is like, hey, if you don't do well in school, you're not going to succeed. Mind you, of course, school is helpful in many different regards.
Sure.
You're really a testimony of, hey, there's other paths around that even despite any lag that there might be in societal terms, that is not the final determination. And I think that could really just encourage listeners who are joining in, that whatever situation they might find themselves in, whether they are not talking to family and they have to literally start from nothing, that they could still take a step into whatever is next for them and creating change in their own lives.
Yeah.
There's just so much to unpack from
let
that.
me be clear. Things were really bad. Like my mom and dad completely disowned me. Like
Wow.
They were done. Don't call, don't write, don't show up. You're done. That's the end all be all to, oh man, that this is real.
Yeah.
Like, especially at that age, then to just be like banished from the family. But the cool thing is, out of that, I was able to build a new relationship with my family.
Wow.
Much more solid foundation. It's real. It's a real relationship, that there's, no more false pretenses and no more of trying to be somebody that I'm not. I get to be who I am. And the cool thing is my parents like that. So
that's absolutely powerful.
They didn't like me when I was trying to be the person that I thought they wanted me to be. Turns out they like who I am in reality.
Wow.
You would have thought.
That's absolutely powerful. I'm glad you highlight that. Of course, what you achieve now, people can see that's very successful. But I think just we could miss out on the idea that there are also some very valuable things in our lives, including relationships with the family. The fact that you found restoration within that. And of course, I'm sure it was a journey. I'm sure it was a process.
It was. It did. It took years.
Even just to hear that, I'm sure some might react to that thinking, goodness, I don't know if I could wait that long. And for others, I think it'd be hopeful for them that they might be in the middle of that. It's probably been years already. And just to hear that for your story, it was possible, could give hope for them as well. To shift gears a bit, talk to us a little bit about what was the journey like from working different jobs into starting and leading your own companies.
Right. That's a good segue. Once I got out of the closet and stopped selling time card refills, well, let's just say since I was there waiting on people to call me, I had a lot of free time, and I was able to save up enough money to get a cell phone. And on that cell phone, I was able to pay for internet connectivity. Keep in mind, this is like in 2007, so this was a while ago.
Goodness.
But I was able to look at the classified ads online and in my free time when I wasn't filling the time card orders. And I found a job in the paper, this IT company that was looking to hire someone here in South Florida. They were based out of Jacksonville. So I went to interview for that job. They hired me, and it was just me down here. The rest of the company was in Jacksonville. They had like 5 customers down here. So I was hired to manage the 5 customers from an IT perspective. And over the next 2.5 years, I turned that 5 customer book of business into like 20 customers.
Goodness gracious.
And so I went to the owner and I said, hey, we've done some really amazing growth down here, and I would like to talk to you about a raise. And he said, I agree, you've done great things. I think you definitely need a raise. How does $1,000 sound? $1,000 a month? No, $1,000 a year.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
Okay, sure, yes, I'll take it. To which I ended up same day going over to one of the new clients that I had won and smoked a cigar with him. He's a radiologist and he lives on the intercoastal, and we were sitting there on the water smoking cigars. And I was telling him about this, and he like almost fell out of his chair. He's like, $1,000. He's like, dude, you need to quit and you need to start your own company. And I was like, well, I got this like non-solicit, non-compete, all this, da, 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 da. He's like, none of that matters. You need to take a leap of faith. Whatever is going to happen is going to happen. You just need to take the first step.
Wow.
How old was I? I was probably 28 or 20, maybe 29. And so I wasn't even 30, and I did it. And, there were consequences because I had a non-solicit and I had a non-compete. And the only clients that even knew of him were the original 5. The other 15 customers had no idea who the owner of this company was. And when I said, I'm going out on my own, they were like, we support you. So they all came with me, which led to a lawsuit because I violated my agreement. But the good news is, we settled it out of court. I had to cough up quite a bit of money. But you know what? At the end of the day, that was the best investment I ever made because it was an investment in myself. And I didn't really see it at that time. I saw it as, I can't believe I have to pay this amount of money. Like, where am I going to get this money? And luckily he was, amicable to work it out over a period of time. And it all worked out, and it was fantastic and scary all at the same time. And then I hired my first employee, and things just kept going and going. And today we have, I think, 40 employees now.
It's amazing. Goodness
Across
gracious.
both companies. Yeah. And I think we're hiring 4 more right now. And I suspect we'll have another 4 to 6 by the end of the year. So it's just, it's been a really wild ride. And like, it wasn't that long ago. I was like, oh my gosh, I might have to fire somebody. And here we are hiring like crazy. So it just goes to show, like, you never know like what's going to happen. It's insane.
No, I'm sure. Coming from that experience, how has that experience affected your leadership style and how you lead your companies right now?
It's actually been brought up a lot lately, and just in internal conversations. And my COO came to me, and I often tell her that she's the glue that holds this place together. But she came to me and said, well, you're the glue that holds me together.
Wow.
And that was quite powerful. My leadership style is really simple. I empower people to be the best that they can be, period. I don't micromanage. I have an expectation that people are going to do what they say they're going to do. And so long as you do that, and if I'm doing my job and empowering you to do that, that's all I need to do. That's all I need to do. And it's worked really well. And it's created a very loyal environment. I'm not putting my finger on top of people. And I fully trust my employees implicitly to do the best that they can do for the customer and the company. And that's kind of been, I'm a college dropout. I haven't been to any business classes. I don't have any management classes. And even if I did take those classes, like, I wouldn't have been coherent enough to even know what they were saying, or I wouldn't have even remembered any of it. So,
Yeah.
So I follow a very simple, keep it simple principle, and trust that people are going to do what they say they're going to do, and empower them to do that. And that's it. It's that simple. And I've seen a lot of different leadership styles over the years, and I may pull bits and pieces that I see to tweak some things here and there. But at the end of the day, that when you boil all the little nuances away, it's really just about empowerment and putting the right people in the right seats. And I'm not necessarily that good at it. I'm not that good at putting the right people in the right seats. I'm an okay hirer, but I don't think I'm a great hirer. However, I've been fortunate enough to luckily hire some great people that can hire other great people. And this is how I like to run my company. And this is how I like to promote people. Many years ago, I think it was 8 years ago now, I get a call from my father-in-law who says, I met this girl in Target. I've hired her to help us unpack boxes and move into our new house. I think you should hire her to be your assistant. My father-in-law at the time was 80. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You met a girl at Target. You hired her to unpack your boxes and you want me to hire her as my assistant. What? And none of this was like computing. Like, I'm like, are you okay? It's like, it doesn't sound right. I had like this random Saturday job thing that I had to do. And I was like, I'm going to hire her for $10 an hour to come help me do this monotonous task. And I got to spend 8 hours with her. It's like, she's perfect. She can be my assistant. So I hired her to be my assistant. And I think at the time, I don't remember, but she wasn't making very much money. She was just out of college, she was just finishing college. I think she was getting her MBA. Very long story short, she's now our COO.
Wow.
Yeah, she's amazing. And she's my right arm, and I would be lost without her. And people try to poach her every month, or at least she tells me they are. So, it's just, I really, really, really like to watch and help people grow into who I think they can become. Who I think a person can become doesn't always hold true. I may be wrong, but if I see the spark and if I get the good gut read on the personality, then I'm usually pretty spot on with who I think a person can become. And then it goes back to just empowering them to get there. And that's what I did with her. And, she came right up through the ranks. I have another story just like that. He didn't come from Target. He came from another one of our clients, but the CEO of that client came to me and said, we're paying this kid, like $10 an hour to do data entry. He's really smart. I think you should hire him to be on your team. I'm like, okay. Sure enough, I did it. And he started out as a tier 1 tech, and he runs all of our networking infrastructure now.
Wow.
Director, so, and I've got story after story about that, empowering the people to be the best that they can be.
That's amazing, which is somewhat rare to find in the context of business. I think very often we could treat business very focused on the bottom line, and we see leadership styles that reflect that, treating sometimes people as commodities.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you experienced that yourself. I mean, raising a clientele from 5 existing customers to 20 and only getting, $1,000 raise as a reward.
Right.
A lot of people could see that like, goodness, like, am I just a commodity? And we've had some offline conversations how you've created pathways for people to meet actual needs that they have, along with just the growth that you desire for them to be in and be a part of. Just how you created change, not only in your own life, but also in just how you leading an organization and teams and so forth, and people growing into new levels of themselves. I think it's inspiring to see.
I appreciate that. One thing that I've learned, ego is a funny thing, and it plays with your mind a lot. And sometimes it's hard to even recognize what's coming from your ego versus what's coming from your heart. But one thing that is a constant and that I always come back to is, I believe I am the sum total of the people I surround myself with. And that it goes in my personal life, and that goes in my business life. That goes with my employees. This company it's not me. It's the sum total of everyone else.
Wow.
I just happen to be the lucky guy that gets to hang out with these people and, boost them up. And, it's them, my employees, that lift me up and make me in charge of this great, awesome company. But the reality is it's them. It's the employees. And I couldn't have done any of this without them. It's been a real blessing to be able to get to a place where I implicitly trust all of my employees. And that's not something that I think a lot of business owners can say.
Oh, that's amazing. Along with that, I'm sure that there are sacrifices that you've had to make in the journey of building these companies. You did it not only once, you did it multiple times of having several companies. I'm sure there were moments where it probably felt lonely as a leader. It probably
Yeah.
felt, am I going to make it through? Kind of like you were sharing earlier, I don't know what's ahead. What helped you navigate through those hard moments when you wanted to give up and you weren't sure if you were able to take another step?
Super easy question. So God and my wife,
Hmm.
Yolanda. But,
Shout out to
uh,
Yolanda.
yeah,
Happy shout out to the wives.
you're right. As a leader, it can be very lonely, and it's not like I have a pool of leaders I could go to get advice from. And a lot of times you have to have self-empowerment as a leader because you don't have someone leading you to empower you. So it all has to come from internally. But the great thing about my wife is she is my ultimate empowerer. She's the one that keeps things in perspective for me. She's the one that helps me recognize when my ego needs a little bit of slapping around and allows me to bring it back to reality and to remember what's important. Because as a business owner and as a leader and having multiple companies to run and operate, and there's just so many unknowns. Like there's not a day that goes by that I'm not faced with something that I've never been faced with before.
Wow.
And you have to rely on your own instincts and intuition and gut to kind of navigate some of these things. And having a really strong, powerful wife to rely on to keep you going and a forward motion, because there's so much that can happen as a business leader that will leave you in indecision, and you'll be frozen and you're just not going to know what to do. It may appear to my employees and it may appear to my wife and others around me that I have all the answers and that I always make all the right decisions, but that's just not the reality. And I do attribute my sanity and my staying on path to my wife quite a bit, but she really helps me keep perspective.
Definitely hearing that. And that's actually a perfect segue. For one, let me just quickly highlight, because I'm sure there's probably people who perhaps aren't married and so forth who are listening and thinking, oh, well, I don't have a spouse who could, help me in that regard. And you've highlighted before, though, I mean, you surrounded yourself with great people, and particularly with your wife is someone who held you accountable, who kind of kept you in check.
Yeah.
And I think those are the type of people we need to surround ourselves with, especially if we're trying to take a first step in changing our own lives or a next step in creating change in whatever environment, is whatever space we're occupying.
One more point on that.
Yeah.
So I want to say, there was a point in time where it's easy to get kind of out of phase on your path. And going back to being the sum total of the people you surround yourself with, there was a period of time before I met my wife, literally 7 months before I met my wife, I was doing like a self reality check. And I was like, I'm not really, going in the direction that I want to go in. And this is before I went out on my own. And at this point in time, I was still, relatively young. I was very single. I had a motorcycle and all my friends had motorcycles, and there was 20 of us. And Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we were on the bikes and we were here and they were there. And we were just doing things that 20 something single guys do, but it was so unfulfilling and I felt empty. So I came back to, well, I am the sum total of the people I surround myself with. And then I took an inventory of the people I surrounded myself with. I'm like, well, no wonder I feel empty right now.
Wow.
Look at who I'm spending time with all the
Yeah.
time. So I made a hard decision. I cut all of those people out of my life immediately.
Wow.
The second I recognized that I was misstepping, I wasn't staying true to what I believe and who I am. I did it. I ripped the Band-Aid and I just stopped hanging out with them and I stopped dating, because I also felt empty there. I felt no real emotional connection to any of the people I dated. And it's like, you know what? I just need a moment to recenter. And I took 6 or 7 months to do that. And I 100% focused on myself.
Wow.
I, meditated, I did yoga, I did all kinds of things. I started journaling, and I was just on this self-improvement journey, and I made rules for myself, written rules. I wrote them down for the types of people I would want to become friends with and the types of females that I would want to date. And if it was a bit of a litmus test, and if people didn't fall into this little litmus test, I just move right along.
Wow.
But you know what? That led me to my wife, and it led me to my really awesome and tight-knit small group of friends that are perfect for me. And it's all about doing the work and making the hard decisions and putting one foot in front of the other.
I'm absolutely taking notes on that for all the single people listening, taking notes. No, that's really good. As we're beginning to land the plane, one thing that you shared online recently is you ran a marathon locally that you trained for in just about 8 weeks. which
Yeah.
is insane. I think that's a perfect picture of taking a step, taking one step, literally,
Yeah.
and going from almost nothing to running a marathon in 8 weeks. What started the idea and what helped you push through to the finish line?
You know, I've never found the one thing that I could consistently do exercise wise. I bought a Peloton and that was great for 6 months. And then the next thing I know, I'm just like hanging stuff off of the handlebar. I was like, you know what? I used to really enjoy running when I was in middle school. I ran track, and it's like, I think I'll try running again. So, but last fall, I think it was the very end of September, I was like, I'm just going to go run a mile. And so I go and I run a mile. I'm like, all right, I could do that. And so I ran a mile a day for 5 days a week. And then the next week, I did a mile and a half for a week. And then I did 2 miles for a week. And then the third or fourth week, I bumped it up to 5 miles. And then I went on a trip to Nashville. We were at dinner. And I was like, well, I'm going to see who will commit to running 5 miles with me at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. And I had like 6 people commit to do so. Which I knew none of them were going to show up because they already had way too much to drink to even be awake at 7. So anyway, I get down to the lobby at 7 o'clock in the morning and I'm the only one there. I'm like, all right, whatever. Who cares? Out the door I go. I go and I run 5 miles. I get back to the lobby. It's now like 7:45, 8 o'clock, somewhere around there. And one of the people that committed to running with me shows up, ready to go. I'm like, okay, I've already run, but let's do it. So I ended up running another 5 miles.
Get out of here.
Yeah. And at the end of it, I was like, I felt amazing. I was like, I just ran 10 miles.
Wow.
Like my head exploded. I couldn't believe it. So then, I came back to Florida, and maybe a week later, I was up at 4 o'clock, and I'm a member of a bunch of running groups on Facebook, and I was scrolling through them. It was like marathon season. So I see all these people like holding up their marathon medals, and I'm like, oh, I think the Palm Beach Marathon's in December. And I look at the date, and sure enough, it was in December. I was like, okay, well, let me look at my calendar. That's like 8 weeks away. Okay. So then I get online. I'm like, 8-week marathon training plan. And I find one.
Goodness.
I'm like, okay. So as long as I follow this, I can run a marathon.
Wow.
So that's what I did. I did in a very intense training schedule. I think at the max, I think there was like a two or 3 week period where I was running like 50 miles in a week, which is quite a bit. My average like 30 in like non-training times. But I did it. I ran the marathon, and I was actually on target to run it in 3.5 hours, which was my goal. But at mile 17, I hurt my hamstring quite bad. But I ended up finishing it right at 4 hours, which is still, I think, respectable.
That's pretty, yeah.
So finished.
Yeah.
That's all I cared about at the end of the day. I had my goals, but my ultimate goal was just to finish.
Listen, you did it in 8 weeks, which I think not many people go in that endeavor, and you did it. So props to you for that.
Thanks.
Well, Eric, it's been amazing speaking with you. Obviously, you've done a lot. Yeah, I mean, it's been amazing to hear your story.
Thank you.
Just changing your life, the direction of your life, how you lead business in such a different way. And one thing that I know about you is that you're a person who likes to give back to the community. I know you served on the board of a local chapter of Habitat for Humanity and giving back to other nonprofits, etc. You're also a family man as well. I know you have a beautiful son.
Thank you.
I would like to ask one final question. Knowing what you know now, if you were to encourage your son to take one step when he's older, what one step would you encourage him to take?
Take a year off after high school. Don't go straight to college.
Wow, that's definitely not conventional, but I think it aligns up exactly with your story.
Yeah. That would be I think the one thing, because looking back on my life, and I think had my dad come to me with that opportunity when I was 18, 19 years old and not, shuttling me to the college route, I think my life would have been a lot different. Like I said earlier, I wouldn't have changed any of the things that I went through to get to where I am today. My plan for my son, that will be the one piece of advice I give him when he graduates high school. The other side of that story is I'm going to say to him, hey, we've set aside the money for you to go to college. You don't have to worry about paying for college. It's all good. It's all there. However, why don't you take this year and think about what it is you really want to do in your life, And if you come back to me with an idea for a business, I'll be there right by your side, and we'll take that money that we set aside for you to go to college and we'll apply it to your business plan.
That's pretty amazing.
So that's what I wish my dad would have done for me. It would have saved him a lot more money, and we probably could have turned the money that he wasted on my college education into a real business. But you know what? The school of hard knocks is sometimes not the worst path to take either. So
I think more people are realizing that today. If there's any takeaway for sure is that for anyone who's considering an unconventional path, they can take one step towards that. Well, Eric, thank you so much just for taking the time to share your story. I know listeners are going to be so encouraged by it. I personally have shared with you before, but just want to publicly say thank you just for being the inspiration that you are, just how you continue to lead your life. And I know many people will be impacted just to hear from your story and encouraged to make their own paths as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Jonathan.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Eric. And I'm definitely looking forward to the next time we do connect.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the One Step Podcast. Consider subscribing and follow on social media at One Step Podcast so you don't miss future insights for your one step in creating change. That's the number One Step Podcast. If you would like to be a part of creating change, you can visit onesteppodcast.com/charity water. As you are on your journey, trust the process because change begins and continues with one step.